Yeah, it's been a rough year. You still, did you do anything yesterday?
No, just hung out with some friends in town, and we had a barbecue going, and that was about it. There were fireworks nearby.
Did you reflect on the year?
Of course, yeah.
How were the discussions like?
It was interesting. So more people than ever kind of feel like there's something wrong with this story and something isn't quite adding up. And yeah, these are good folks in Western Massachusetts. They would call them working class, and yeah, something's not quite right in the story here.
Yeah, like I can't remember which guest told me, but people are looking. I think, and I spoke to a lot of economists yesterday. He's like, Mario, like people are just looking at that we're talking about the gap, the inequality gap, and like people keep talking about Trump praising the stock market, etc., which we know is led by these big tech stocks. The average American, doesn't know that, but they also don't see their own lifestyle improve. They're like, all right, you keep talking about the stock market doing better, but our life is just getting worse and worse. And I was actually saw a clip of one of the guests, comedians that Joe Rogan has on his show all the time. The big guy, he's on the show all the time, the big comedian. And he's like, since I was young, I just gave up on voting because every 4 years you get a new president. He says all these things and then does the same things as the last guy. And I think this year broke a lot of people, I feel, because a lot of people put a lot of hope into Trump, and he did seem like the first president in so long, in so many decades, to really go against the swamp, whatever you want to call it. But then for him to revert back to such an extreme level to the swampy behavior, from making money from the presidency, going into forever wars, increasing debt, I think it really shook a lot of people.
Yeah, I would agree. And sort of that was my local bookend to last Wednesday. I was down in Washington, D.C. at a Feds for Freedom conference. And this is being led by a bunch of federal workers who really, they started where they got like really canned for their refusal to take the COVID jab, right? And so it was Feds for Medical Freedom, but they found out they have it's a bigger issue than that. And so they were really talking about, this was Jim Erdman invited me down. He's the CIA whistleblower who's been, in front of like Rand Paul. Anyway, but these were really great people, very dedicated. It was really heartwarming to see people that were like this solid, full of integrity. Joe Kent was there. And they're just very worried about the direction of the country. They were, I consider myself red pilled, black pilled, depending on the topic. They were pretty concerned that there wasn't an easy fix here.
Yeah, no, I'm starting to get that feeling as well. Yeah, that's worrying. Well, it kind of links to a piece of news that came out a couple of days ago, and that's Tucker. Did you see the comment he made about starting a new party? Actually, you referenced Joe Kent. I actually brought it up with Joe Kent as well, and he started floating the idea. Actually, I think I floated the idea to him. I'm like, what if you and Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, I mentioned Matt Gaetz because he was part of the conversation, and Tucker and others. It's not about forming another party. Someone was explaining to me yesterday. It's about forming a bloc that has enough voting power, similar to what RFK did. I think Robert Barnes was explaining to me yesterday. It's like having a bloc that has enough following that could shift the needle for the Democrats or the Republicans, and then they have influence over the policies of whatever party they decide to back. So it's not about a third party getting the votes. It's about a group of a new party, if you want to call it that supports, that merges with the left or the right. Again, RFK is the best example when everyone was waiting to see which side he picks.
Yeah. Well, it's an attractive idea because I think a lot of people, myself included, feel politically homeless. To your first point, it doesn't seem to matter who you elect in. We get the same policies, right? It's just nothing seems to really change, right? The same war policy, the same foreign aid policies, the same lack of reform at the major health institutions. It's kind of nothing changes, and so that was what I found like was really concerning in with these Feds for Freedom, was the stories they told about the pressure they were put under by their respective organizations to get the vaccine when they didn't want it, right? And had every legal right, constitutional right to say no. But the pressure tactics were extraordinary. And the CIA people, they filed a suit against the CIA because what the CIA had done was, rather than saying, oh, this is an HR matter, we're going to try and lean on this person, they actually shifted the investigation of these people over to their counterterrorism task force, which you reserve for terrorists and known spies. So that's in their files now. They were treated in the same category as terrorists and known spies for simply saying, no, thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty screwed up. Another thing as well for someone that creates a lot of content than me, a story that I saw yesterday that the UK is trying to have influence over YouTube's algorithm in the UK. Not sure if you saw that, but this I thought 2 days ago, and I started thinking a lot about it. What I was thinking of is like, if they actually do this, people would either not even realize, and the ones that realize would still accept it and just choose complacency. For example, when people realized that YouTube was censoring content related to COVID, as one example, and I'm sure there's many other similar examples, people complained, but the majority of them just didn't care or didn't know about it. And even the ones that complained, I'm sure most of them still go on YouTube and still watch their content on YouTube. So I'm like, man, if I was in those rooms where the guys that have the influence making decisions, in their mind, do they think that they just have that ability to do whatever they want? Like, even if we know what they're doing, for example, the YouTube algorithm or the way they've weaponized lawfare to be able to get their agenda across, in their mind, there's nothing people can or will do about it. It's almost like the ship has sailed, which is even more worrying. Like, if Trump was able to start a war with Iran, it's like, this is like the craziest thing right under, probably the only worst thing that's logical, starting a war with Russia. So it's like the only next step up. But other than that, starting a war with Iran was like one of the craziest things Trump would do, if I told you that when he first got elected. Yet he still does it. And while he lost popularity, he still has a pretty strong support base in MAGA, weirdly enough.
Yeah. It's there's that sense of inevitability to all this, right? And there's a direction to this story, and it's been going there, and it's independent of who's in power. Weirdly, under Trump, we've had a much faster progression towards what we would call that technological, dystopia. I think of it, as other people think of it, as a utopia, but things that never could have been done under Biden, because the MAGA people never would have put up with it. But because it's Trump, it's okay. But when we're looking at the flock cameras bringing Palantir in to harmonize and merge government databases and on and on and on, that I don't think any of that would have been possible under a Democratic president. So faster.
Yeah, I agree.
Faster.
I agree. That's a good point. Trump, I remember one of my guests told me, talking about the Iran war, they said something along the lines of, if there's any person that could really break that relationship with Israel, it is Trump, who's right now the biggest backer of Israel, because Trump he's just got that ability to really do the unthinkable and get away with it. And you've given an example where that has happened or accelerated. But it could also accelerate in the other direction. It's not looking like that. I don't know. Like, what do you think of the possible shift with Israel? We've talked about it for many weeks now. Are you seeing anything substantial, not substantial, anything of substance other than the rhetoric since all the statements were made a few weeks ago? Because in Lebanon, Israel's still there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the bombing is still happening on a daily basis. So I don't know.
Yeah. And Iran is not reacting for some reason. So maybe we could discuss that in a bit. But I trust actions, not words, So if the central bank tells me gold is a barbarous relic, but they're accumulating it, I prefer to watch what they're doing. So in this case, there's words that say, oh, there's this fracture, not with Israel per se, but maybe between Bibi and Trump. But on the other hand, we have this Section 224. Looks like it's going to scream right on through, right? Which is going to harmonize and merge the Israeli military with our own.
It's going to get through. It looks like it's going through.
It looks like it at this stage.
I completely lost track of it. I'm guilty of losing track of it. Fucking hell. That's wild. That's worse than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I would totally agree. And I think Joe Kent makes this point very, very well. He says, because he's just trying to get the Overton window open a bit. He says, look, it's totally okay for Israel to be Israel, but they have their interests, we have ours, and our interests are our interests, and their interests are their interests. They're not always overlapped perfectly, so we should make sure we have autonomy and separateness in decisions, and it's just very sensible, obviously. But I feel like we've kind of entered an age where, like, sensible things are, I don't know. It's like we're just in an era where, like, there's a lot of nonsense going on right now. It's almost like reason has left the room entirely at this point for a lot of things. I can't explain it.
No, or just people are not aware. I think we go too deep and start imagining that most people know what we know. I bet you if you just go to the average American, just walk down Times Square, just ask 20 Americans, 100 Americans there, do you know what Section 224 is? I bet you'd be lucky to get one. I think that says a lot. I think the dissemination of information is the main issue, because you could do if you're controlling what information people get, and that's why freedom of speech is so important, you can get away with anything. Like, I saw a poll, I don't know if I saved it actually, just before we started. It doesn't make the point too well, but a New Financial Times and Focal Data poll found that 60% or 58% of US voters believe Trump's war with Iran was not worth the cost, as the conflict continues to weigh on his approval ratings, blah, blah. 58% believe the war was not worth the cost. But that means 42% of Americans believe the war was worth the cost. I'm not saying who won the war or whether the objectives are achieved. It's worth the cost. Almost half of Americans believe that, 1 in 2. But that's like an extreme stance. It's like some things are disputed. Who's winning the war between Russia and Ukraine? Depends who you ask. There's a lot of nuances. But in terms of was the war with Iran worth it, you speak to any analyst, even the most pro-American, anti-Iranian analyst, people from the FDD would tell me the same thing. Like, from an ROI perspective, looking at America's interests, it was not worth the cost. But then, so I might get, 1 out of 20 analysts that wouldn't say that. But then to have 1 or 2 Americans, it just shows that the information that the average American has, it's not only in the US, but we're just talking about the US because that's like the pinnacle of freedom of speech, free speech. Section 224 seems like a drop in the ocean.
Well, I think most people are probably...
We're very cynical today, Chris. On July 5th.
July 5th, I know. Looking forward to the next 250.
Exactly, man. And the irony as well of the. Sorry, go ahead. I'll let you make the comment.
Well, it's hard because you and I and our followers, I'm sure, are very high context people, so we're tracking all of this, and I think it's hard once you really become familiar with what's actually happening and you can start to see the patterns for what they are. It's difficult not to say, wow, this is wrong. It's going in the wrong direction. I mean, just from my perspective, you mentioned, UK wants to control YouTube's algorithm, right? In the UK right now, I literally can't believe what I'm seeing in terms of who police are arresting, what they're arresting them for, which crimes they're not prosecuting, which ones they're being soft on. If that isn't an intentional dismantling of the culture of the UK, I don't know how else to interpret it. And when you see it that way, once you realize you're under attack, I don't know that there's any other proper response besides to, get angry and put up a wall around that. Or I don't know how to interpret that. But I know so many people in the UK who are considering bailing on it at this point in time because it's bad and getting worse, and they don't want to live there as it goes through its descent into wherever it's headed.
Yeah, I spoke to the producer of the movie, the Citizen one. You know which one I'm referring to? The one that Elon posted about.
Vigilante Citizen?
Vigilante Citizen. So I was speaking to the producer of that movie, and you know about obviously you know about the storyline. So it's about a person that had his family, I think, killed by a migrant, something along those lines. And then he became a vigilante. And then one of the first victims the first crimes he acts on was a woman was raped by 6 men, I think illegal immigrants, Muslim illegal immigrants. And it was inspired by the gang rapes in the UK. And then he takes matters into his own hands. He kills the judge because the judge called one of the perpetrators, one of the boys that raped the girl, also a victim. So the girl was a victim, but the boy that raped her was also a victim. So that mindset, that mind virus triggered the vigilante to kill the judge. And then he goes and not only kills the boy, but he also kills the boy and his whole family, including his mother, who posted on social media that something along the lines of the girl that was raped deserved it because of the way she's dressed. So I'm trying to get the story right. I haven't seen the movie. I've just seen clips of it. But I spoke to the producer about it. One of the questions I asked, one of the conclusions we made is like, the movie, there's no risk of the movie leading to violence. It's more, the movie is an indication of the mindset that people are at. Because remember, Hollywood makes movies, or producers make movies that people could relate to. To relate to a movie, that means you have to have those feelings or those thoughts already in real life. So that the mindset of people in Europe is in a very worrying place. There's another gentleman I spoke with, Mr. Oliver, I forgot his first name, but from GB News, he's been on the show a couple of times. Great guy, Neil Oliver, great guy. And he's very concerned, as in genuinely concerned, that his country, the UK, is heading towards, I'm just going to say the word, civil war. So it's like a taboo word no one wants to use. But and you know, you get to that level when kind of all else fails, and I feel like people are starting to feel that way. Like no matter what we do, no matter who we vote in, no matter how many times we protest, nothing changes. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So if we look at the direction things are going, you know, economically, obviously that's where a lot of people start to feel the pinch, right? And I think, you know, Trump likes to say, "Oh, the stock market's going up. That means everything's awesome." And the issue is that when you look at it, the top 10% of households in the U.S. own 93% of all the equities, right? So the stock market might be going up, and that's really good for the top 10%, but has no bearing on everybody else, pretty much, right? So it's not even like remotely a general indicator of health, right? We would be wanting to look at other things like, I don't know, are people having families? Are they starting households? Are they in the labor force? What's their happiness index? There's a lot of things you could look at. I just get the sense that the people in charge, not only I think they're actually indifferent to the plight of the average person, which is a pretty harsh statement, right? They're indifferent. Yeah. It's not even that. Sometimes I feel like, you know, you get the sense that like almost like you're an enemy of the state if you don't say exactly what the state wants. That's clearly how the UK is treating its citizenry. Like they're enemies. If you don't believe in our policies over here, you're the enemy. But I think it's worse than that. I think they're indifferent, and I don't know how we got there.
Yeah. When you speak to, so I live in my bubble. Like I don't speak to a lot of people, and the only people I speak to really are people like yourself. You know, again, people that have all this information, have all the context, or high achievers, and all the other time. And I'm in my world running my businesses and stuff. So I never really get the chance to speak to the average person about these things. I'm also not a social person, so I never sit there having a coffee or beer with friends and chat about these things. So I'll ask you a question that might sound silly to you, but it's actually some. I'd love to know the answer is, when you speak to the average American, I don't know if you get that opportunity. I'm sure you do. What do they say? How do they see things? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do they see things? How do they see where their countries are? Maybe they in a completely different mindset. Maybe they think the country's doing great. But then how do they make sense of how they're living and how the cost of living has become a lot worse? Everyone's worried for their children. People are starting to worry about AI and how their children are going to find a job. What should they learn about? What are these conversations like?
So this is a great question. It's been shifting lately. So I think just as recently as a couple of years ago, it was almost verboten. Like, we just don't talk about those things. It's impolite. Like, you know, sports, weather, kids, you know, you stick to the topics, safe topics. And then people started to slowly start to notice, they were allowed to notice this thing, that maybe the COVID jabs were not good, right? That everybody now knows somebody who they suspect had or know in their heart of hearts, you know, had a very bad reaction to those. And so you're starting to see, you can have conversations like that now. And as well, a big topic that's now totally safe to talk about is inflation, is the cost of everything, right? because it's not just the cost of milk and eggs, it's insurance. Insurance costs have exploded in the United States, home, health, auto. And so people are talking about that openly now, and that shock level is rising up the socioeconomic ladder, where I think we're starting to see a clear majority of people can talk about this stuff. So the way I think about this is, there's a guy, Ben Hunt, he put together like a really beautiful series of essays, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And he related it around this idea of the story of the emperor has no clothes, right? And he said, this is a very, very important phenomenon, because social change happens when something comes out of what's called private knowledge. You and I talking, everybody listening, we can say whatever we want. It's still private knowledge, even though lots of people know it. Something becomes common knowledge when everybody knows that everybody knows the same thing. And then suddenly, boom, it changes, right? So in that story of the emperor has no clothes, the emissary is the kid, is the child. Everybody has private knowledge that he's naked, but until somebody yells it out, so the whole crowd knows that the whole crowd knows the same thing. And then suddenly, whoa, king's embarrassed and he walks off and all that stuff. So private knowledge was like, in the way Ben Hunt wrapped these stories up, he said, remember Harvey Weinstein? Everybody knew this guy was not a good guy. You didn't want to get caught alone in his office if you're a young starlet, right? And there were whole networks of women who would take the young starlets aside and say, hey, don't get caught in an office with this guy. Everybody knew, privately. And then it took Rose McCone saying it out loud. And all of a sudden, the Clintons didn't want anything to do with him, and prosecutors were prosecuting. And once it went into common knowledge, because everybody knew the same thing, that's when the change happened. So that's why it's so important to have these conversations like you're having, like I'm having, because we have to just say things as if we want to get to that common knowledge stage where we can just openly admit something that everybody kind of privately knows, but isn't yet there. So that's what I consider myself to be, as a common knowledge emissary. You just say things that people need to hear. And if you do that often enough and it breaks through that mindset, then all of a sudden you can have those conversations. So 2-3 years ago, if I said on a crowded bus, hey, I think these COVID jabs were harmful, I mean, you would have gotten frowny faces. I mean, there would have been all that. Now, I think you get people just kind of nod and go, oh yeah, I know that now, because it's moved out of private into common knowledge. So that's the work. The work is, how do we get these things that everybody knows to something that everybody knows that same thing.
That's so well explained. And I feel like, so if we go back to the Israel issue and the way Israel first versus America first, I think we're crossing the chasm on that front. It feels that before, no one would dare say it become anti-Semitic. But
exactly.
Now it's, slowly becoming something that everybody knows, everybody talks about. And I feel like as we're crossing the chasm, they're trying to crack down on it. They're trying to censor it, but it's a bit too late. Kind of when you cross into that, into the everybody knows that everybody knows. When you cross into that world, then it's really almost impossible to put the genie back in the bottle. Do you think we've crossed the chasm on that front, or we're still not there yet?
I think it's dangerously underway for the people who want to keep that genie back in the bottle. It's for sure one of the things that we know is that the Israel firsters, they've lost the younger generation. Almost, pretty comprehensively, right? At this point, they still have the boomers, but so we're getting that generational divide on the whole piece right there. And I think it was, astonishing how little coverage it got in this country, but just looking at the outpouring of support and mourning at Khomeini's funeral, how many world leaders showed up there, right? Like from how many different countries, and just if anything, I think it's common knowledge across the rest of the world, maybe not in the United States, but it was an enormous mistake, a strategic mistake, a tactical mistake to kill this, their supreme religious leader.
If you can play KK, can you play funeral clips? Because they are massive. 9 million mourners, according to some estimates, that have hit the streets, and obviously leaders from around the world. But that's one of the biggest. I think that the third biggest, there was one in India decades and decades ago in terms of funeral processions, the most people to attend a funeral procession. Second biggest was the death of the last supreme leader, Mujtaba Khomeini, sorry, Ayatollah Khomeini, and now Ayatollah Khamenei. He's got about 10% of Iran's population on the streets, along with world leaders from around the world. So I think that, from a strategic perspective, short-term thinking, you don't look at the consequences of this, but these are tens of millions of people that see the US in a negative light. And that is the sentiment that leads to things like 9/11. You know, I've had guests on the show, and one thing I learned in the last year, last year really, was the fact that the main reasons Osama bin Laden did what he did, he said it himself in various writings and in interviews, is the US bases in Saudi and US intervention in the region, and number two is American support to Israel. So it's the US intervention and what the US did in the region that led to that level of hatred, that led to an act as violent as 9/11, that then led to the destructive foreign policy or self-destructive foreign policy of the US within the region. Iraq War, Afghanistan War, and we're still stuck in the region till now, decades later. And then things like the killing of the leader. There's chants on the streets in Iran, death to Israel, death to the US. We will avenge your death, dear leaders, things like that. I was watching those clips. So these are Iranians that might have been indifferent to the US, might have even liked the US. Their whole mindset changed. And for 10% of the population to be on the streets, that means a lot of these people are people that don't even like their government. They're people that maybe were on the streets in January, but they're on the streets now again. But these are things that are not being measured. When Trump talks about, I've sunk their navy, that's not even short-term thinking. That's just a marketing slogan. But what really matters are things like this: the people on the streets. And Trump yesterday, I was shocked when I saw this. I don't know if he's just talking shit or whether he means it, but he said something along the lines of, "I saw people weeping, and I don't know why they're weeping, because they're supposed to hate their government." And he's like talking like how it's bizarre. He was surprised to see people crying at the funeral. If that's true, that means the president of the United States, it's not delusional, but he's living in his own bubble, and that's pretty dangerous.
Well, even more shocking, he said out loud, again, he could have been just talking shit, but he said, oh, you know, we could have bombed them and taken them all out, but then we wouldn't have anybody left to negotiate with. So he was openly talking about bombing heads of state at a funeral procession, in a mourning session, right? Which is, that's a level of moral nihilism I think it's kind of hard to wrap my head around. That is not the leader of the free world, the people who are defending democracy. That's not the kind of statement that comes out of the people who are the people you want to be in charge of anything. I found it shocking that level.
Who said it? I know that the guy, the commentator, the pro-Israeli commentator, the one that him and Tucker fight all the time, Mark Levin. I know Mark Levin was saying that, but you're saying Trump said that as well, or just Mark Levin?
Yep. Yeah, Trump said that too.
I know Mark Levin posted something along the lines of a missed opportunity. All the leaders were there in one place. It's a missed opportunity to kill them. Something like that. He posted it today. But what did Trump say? Do you remember approximately what he said?
Yeah, if you give me a second, I can dig it up here.
Yeah, if you can. I missed that comment. Please don't tell me he said it on yesterday on July 4th during the celebrations of the 250th anniversary, because that would make it even worse. Let me find you the Mark Levin. Let me find you the Mark Levin tweet. I'll actually read that out as well. But let me see. But and oh, by the way, you know, Mujtaba Khamenei actually didn't. Oh, there's Mark Levin. Mark Levin says, yesterday the enemy gathered en masse, all in one place. Opportunity lost. And he was quote tweeting another account on X who was saying, at Ayatollah Khamenei's funeral, the crowd chanted "Death to America." Every US ally who attended should be forced to answer questions. But this is a problem. So again, I'll read out the statement that someone said that Mark Levin is quoting. He says, at Khamenei's funeral, the crowd chanted "Death to America." But instead of reflecting on why they're calling for death to America, what did the US do to lead to millions of people making chants like this? His conclusion, instead of reflecting on what did we do to lead to all that hatred, his conclusion is every US ally should be forced to answer questions. It's just weird. It's just weird that that's the conclusion they come to, instead of the US needs to answer questions on why and what they did, what decision they made to be able to lead to so many people calling for death to America and death to Israel and death to Trump, some by name.
Yeah. So here it is. Economic Times reporting, Trump said, one shot and we can take them all out.
Oh yeah, I saw that one. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. My team put it in one of the titles for one of our interviews today. Let me get it out. I've got the whole statement. KK, you know which one you're referring to, KK? Can you send me that story? I saw it earlier. I want to open up my screen as well, but that's I'll read the whole context as well, because I was reading it literally a few hours ago. President Trump told Axios that the Iranians, quote, are begging to make a deal, but said both sides decided to take a week off. And then he says the following on the funeral. They are all there, one shot, and we can take them all out. But we are not going to do that because we would have nobody to negotiate with. But just the mindset of making statements like this, it's just, these are the things that people like Ben Gvir say. Mm-hmm. Just even if, we always give him, and I give him that kind of leeway. It's like, look, this is Trump. He speaks his mind. And, when someone speaks their mind, if I speak publicly the things I would say to my loved one, it would be perceived in different ways. But you speak a lot more freely when you speak into you. And I'm sick of this guy. Remember the Fox News, the Tucker's messages came out, what he was saying privately about Trump. So when you say these things privately, you don't say them publicly. But Trump kind of blurts everything out sometimes, because you can always give him that leeway. But there are limits when you're there's a certain level of etiquette, because what you're doing is setting the precedent where this is okay. And it just makes it harder to criticize people according to death to America, for example, or the annihilation of the state of Israel. When we criticize them, they could just respond and say, hey, your own president said he wanted to wipe out a civilization to never return again. So who are you to dictate to us what we could say? So see the moral, there's a term for it, moral, whatever, that would cause the moral harm that was caused by this. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's not diplomatic. B, it's kind of a bad look all around. But C, it sends the message that says, look, when we negotiate with you, you have to accept our terms or we'll kill you. And that's not negotiating anymore, right? At that point in time. But clearly, where I think Trump should be aware at this point in time, that you and I have been aware for months now, is that the United States doesn't really have any good military options left. And so we're going to have to negotiate and possibly admit maybe it wasn't worth the cost. Maybe we shouldn't have done it in the first place, that there were lots of other avenues. I mean, let's not forget that the Strait of Hormuz was never closed, never had any tolls, never had any friction prior to February 28th of this year. So, I mean, that's the reality of the situation. So I don't understand where all this bluster goes. But last time you and I talked, we're like, well, if you wanted to keep things sort of like fiery and like cooking, this is the kind of, again, actions, not words, right? So the actions of the United States have been I would not consider that we've negotiated in good faith or with any urgency to say, hey, we got to get the strait open as soon as possible. That has not how I've perceived it so far.
We're going to get to the straits, and I want to ask you about oil prices, because I've just learned a lot in the last week, so I've got a lot of questions for you. Just one thing on that front. Are you worried that Netanyahu and Trump are meeting next week, or that worry is gone, knowing that the US has no options left, so nothing Netanyahu would say would change that reality?
So my belief system is that Israel has a very strong, compelling interest separate from ours. They want to keep the United States engaged with Iran. I don't believe that Iran has been properly defanged by Israeli standards. In fact, worse, they may be coming out of this with a bigger swagger and a sense of more power than before the war. That's certainly how I'm seeing it at this stage. So Israel's always going to be advocating for do more, and Israel's approach is always bomb first and, ask questions never, I guess. That's just how they are. And they've done that with, the West Bank and Syria and, now Lebanon and of course Gaza. So I don't know. Israel's interest is very strong to keep us involved in this whole thing. So that's that. I don't know what if Trump has to be getting talked to at this point in time, by senior military leaders saying, look, there's only so much we can do here. And I don't think there would be anything to be gained by going back into just sort of what we'd call just airstrikes, because airstrikes never really change the shape of war. They're painful, but they don't change anything. Nobody ever won a international campaign by air alone. And I can't see anything anywhere that would suggest that it makes any sense to put any boots on the ground. But if we did that, as we've talked about before, colossal mistake, it's going to be very painful, and I will regret that too, I would bet. So I don't know what the options here really are besides negotiate and give up some things that it's going to hurt a little.
Yeah. I just don't want to get too complacent, because I'm in your camp. I don't want to get too complacent because I never thought a year ago we'd be in this war in the first place. So what I would consider unthinkable, I should probably always leave on the table. But I'm in the same camp. That there's the other argument that people make is that it's a matter of when, because of the importance, we've talked about this a while ago, of the importance of the Strait of Hormuz for the US. So the cost is significant, but one can argue that the cost of not capturing the Strait of Hormuz or not causing regime change in Iran is even more significant in the long term, because it just gives the world's most important energy choke point to China. So now China still has rare earth refining, but also, and renewable energy, etc., getting miles ahead of the US and the rest of the world, catching up with nuclear energy, but also control or influence over the Strait of Hormuz. And look what we're seeing right now with the Straits. We've got the Americans trying to escort ships out of there and failing time and time again. The Straits, there was a report yesterday. I'm not sure if I've been keeping track of it, but I was looking at it yesterday. So there was a report by Kepler talking about the number of ships going through. So the number of ships going through the Strait of Hormuz is about half of what the Trump administration is claiming, and about a third of what it was before the war, so still significantly less. And then there was also yesterday, there were a few ships trying to get through the Omani side, but then they turned around and went back. Some of them just did not go back in. Others went through the Iranian side. And the Omani side completely closed yesterday. Today, a few more ships started going through, just a handful. There was one escort. But it's fair to say, the fact is Iran still controls the Strait of Hormuz. And there is that big power struggle happening right now. The Americans are trying to make some sort of offer to Iran to just give up on controlling the Strait of Hormuz. Apparently, they're dangling a carrot of lifting the sanctions in return for Iran not charging a fee. Meanwhile, the Europeans, according to Bloomberg, have already accepted that there'll be some sort of fee. The Omanis have also given a formal proposal to the US a few days ago about the new management structure, which includes fees of the Strait of Hormuz between Oman and Iran. And the only things the Europeans are looking for now is not having a fee. It's for Iran to charge the same fee to everybody. It's like, hey, please, treat us like you would treat Russia and China. Don't give preferential treatment to any countries. That's what the Europeans are allegedly requesting from Iran, whereas the US is still trying to wrestle that control away from Iran. But that gives you an idea that Iran is controlling the Straits, and the only question is, can the US really afford it, or is it worth another gamble or two?
I mean, listen, like you said, anything's possible. I've given up trying to predict this along rational lines. It would be irrational at this stage to renew attacks, but that could easily happen for reasons, And we've all seen that there's like, a little back and forth. Iran has sort of floated the trial balloon that maybe they have to preemptively attack Israel, tired of sort of, doing tit for tat. Maybe it's time to become aggressive again. We found out this last week from some satellite photos that actually the damage that Israel had sustained from those missile attacks was a lot higher, obviously, than they were admitting at the time. I think one of their main refineries up in Haifa is going to take a long time to fix. And so as we look at all of that, obviously Iran also said earlier on, I don't know if they're sticking to this, but they said, listen, if you attack us again, we're going to go after the remaining infrastructure and we're just going to take out all the energy infrastructure, right? Which is, of course, creates a global catastrophe. So nobody wants that. whatsoever. And so I can't imagine what the upside would be for the U.S. to do more attacks at this stage. I can only see pretty significant downside because obviously, Iran, we, Israel and the U.S. lacked the capability to stop them from launching missiles. Tried hard, bombed a lot of sites, bombed where we thought all those missiles were stored, and they just patched up the tunnels and brought them back out and kept firing. So I think that's just the reality of the situation. The U.S. and Israel were unable to stop them from firing missiles. And if they wanted to, we also learned from satellite photos we saw last week that how accurate they were. I mean, really accurate. Not just hitting buildings, but hitting specific parts of buildings, from, 1,000 kilometers away. So that's the reality of the situation. And plus now, as we just saw with the morning processions, that it's a fairly galvanized nation as well. So those are bad sort of signs to say, well, let's keep annoying them and with these bombings. And, because I think Trump's one of his, like we mentioned last time, one of the things I love about him is that when he does speak, he has no filters. So just what he's thinking comes right out. And 2 weeks ago, he said we were 4 weeks away from real catastrophe, running out of, reserves of oil, and that would lead to very bad economic outcomes. I think all that's true. And, that's the reality right now.
There was something I learned about recently. Do you know much about the crack margin, the crack spread, how that's calculated in the oil prices? Okay, so one of my guests was telling me about it, and I have had him on the show twice to really do a deep dive into it. And his name is Philip Pilkington. And who's in the interview yesterday, he kind of went deeper into it, trying to calculate it. And based on his calculation, looking at the price of the refined oil coming out of the refineries and looking at the margin they're making, he's like, Mario, there's two logical explanations for their margins. One of them is price gouging. One of them is their cost is actually significantly higher than the spot price. And based on these calculations, etc., how much they're paying per barrel right now coming out of the Strait of Hormuz is $110, $115 a barrel. There's no way to know for sure, but this is based on the calculation from the available data. So his argument is that the prices on the markets, the spot prices, and obviously the futures are heavily manipulated. How much? So first, do you think there is some sort of manipulation going on? Number one. Number two, what would you say is the price of the oil coming out of the Strait of Hormuz? And that links to number three, which is how long before the U.S., because even low oil prices doesn't mean the U.S. is getting enough oil. The U.S. could still be using its reserves, which are already almost completely depleted. And that means the U.S. would lose significant leverage in any future conflict with Iran. So Iran knows that, and that gives them the upper hand in the negotiations. But I'd love to get your analysis on the price of oil and the current supply glut that everyone's talking about, because the numbers just don't show up. Like in the last 24 hours, there's been 39 ships that went through the Strait of Hormuz in the last 39 hours. So still the same average that's been going on for the last few days, which is, again, half of what the Americans are saying and a third of what it was before the war.
Yeah, let's take the so for in the price of oil, we're really quoting the futures price, which is a paper market, right? And so in the paper market, you and I could open up an account and start trading oil, right? You don't produce any, I'm not consuming any. We have no interest in it. We're just speculators, right? And so right now, the amount of speculating in the oil market is super high, right? So if you consider the signal, producers and consumers coming to a fair market price, that's the signal. The noise is people like you and I just trading who have no interest in either producing or consuming the stuff. And I get there's a point where you say, okay, it's good to have some speculators. They provide additional liquidity. That's good. It's easier to sort of make trades. But right now, the noise to signal ratio is 50-1, right? So for every barrel that's finally produced and consumed, there's about 50 that are traded off. And it's just all this paper going back and forth. Okay, that's part one. Part two is all those managed money people, the money managers, the CTAs, those are the commodity trading advisors. These are the people that are really out there doing all of this crazy paper trading. All right. That's highly subject to being manipulated if you have a big player come in who just starts just selling paper oil. And that'll make the futures price for oil go down. It just will. And there's a normal ratio that they look at, which is, okay, how many of these managed money people are bullish versus how bearish are they? That is, how many long positions have they taken compared to how many short positions are they holding? And then this chart just came out. I'm going to put up here. Just came out a couple days ago from John Kemp. And this is absolutely astonishing what we're looking at here. So what this is this is the ratio of money managers' total long and short position. So it's long divided by short. So if you see here a number like 18, it says they had 18 long positions for every short position. They were heavily long. In March 31st of 2026, they were sitting at about 12. And this is between 2011, 2026. So this is 15 years of data. So Mario, in 15 years, we've never seen a reading as low as this one we got on June 30th of 2026, where these money managers are as bearish on oil as they have been at any point in time in the past 15 years. Not just a little bit bearish, but the most bearish they've been in 15 years. Now, how do we begin to account for that? Because normally what you're doing in this market is you are saying, well, what are the risks? So we're seeing inventories get drawn down. Normally there's a ratio between the inventories and the price. We've set new records for how low the price is given where we are on the inventory curve. New records, right? Like, oh, never been here before. And as well, you and I both know that if you're in this space, these are very smart people. They have to be looking at the tanker traffic. They have to be looking at the verbiage going on back and forth. Those are risks, right? Is the risk of the strait being reclosed zero? No, it's not. It's something higher than that. So just seeing that we have max bearishness in these money managers, there's two explanations. One, they've completely lost the plot line and they've become idiots. Or two, somebody's in there selling a lot, just selling. Somebody's got a sell order in on that. Hey, just sell this. So that's when we say manipulation, to me, that would mean some entity, maybe a government, maybe Japan, maybe ours, maybe both. Somebody with deep pockets has an interest in saying, we need the price to go down. And so we're just going to we have a standing sell order. If any buying comes in, just sell it. That's how you would create that. But that chart I just showed is like, this is max bearishness at a time of literally it's one of the most elevated risk structures that I've ever seen in the oil space is an odd signal. So let me give you one other possible plausible explanation, though. In truth, there's actually a massive recession that's already been kicked off because of all of the stuff that's already happened. And that's what we're seeing is there is going to be a big dive in demand because something really got injured in the global economy. That's the other way to interpret that at this point in time. But I don't have good data for that in my economic statistics yet.
Yeah, it's not that, and there's not like a massive, at least there's the possibility of a big recession, but nothing too significant that would lead to those prices, considering the risks involved. A third explanation that Philip was talking about, what he believes, is that he thinks algorithmic trading is very easy to manipulate. And that's what Trump and the administration are doing. When you feed news to Axios saying a deal's on there's a deal about to happen, there's that many ships being escorted, we control the Strait of Hormuz, we got a great deal with Iran, all these different claims. While we, the analyst that's following this closely would read these statements, we know, he's manipulating the markets, and we start making jokes about it. It's Sunday again, Monday, markets open tomorrow. Trump's going to say something positive, and then he says something positive. But what Philip's argument is that these algorithms are not taking that into consideration, and that manipulation is in information overload for the algorithms that is actually having the effect that's needed on algorithmic trading. So all these different algorithms are selling oil and bearish on oil because of this massive amount of information that talks about a massive glut in oil and a drop in oil prices and the war's over forever and all that, whereas reality is different. So that's what the market manipulation is, a manipulation of the algorithms rather than the people.
Well, that's true. And let me take it a step further, because the vast majority of these algorithms are listen, they're machine algorithms. They have no emotions. They don't really care. The vast majority of them also are not basing their positionings or their trades and all their behaviors on actual fundamentals. most of them are what are called momentum trades, right? So they're agnostic. If oil's going this way, they go this way. If oil's going that way, they go that way. And, these are the machines that are actually co-located on the floor of the trading houses, right? So the Chicago Mercantile Exchange in Aurora, Illinois, there's these firms with these algos, they have machines tucked right on the floor of that, right? Just like they do at the New York Stock Exchange, et cetera. And they have really short fiber optic cables because they need to be a millisecond or a nanosecond faster than the next guy or gal, right? So that's the nature of the beast. So how easy is that to manipulate? Well, one, you do the headlines, but two, if somebody just comes in and gives a little nudge at the right time in coordination with the headline, you get everybody stampeding off in, all the algos start going this way.
What type of nudge? What do you mean by nudge?
Nudge, it's somebody just dumped. So just by way of context.
Okay. Momentum trading, yeah. So exactly. So it's like a big dump along with the news. So you put out a news saying peace deal imminent. Trump says he has a deal with Iran, and then someone gives that nudge by doing a big sell order. No, obviously a few sell orders. The algorithm catches the headline, catches the momentum, ticks all the boxes, and then the cascade begins.
Exactly. So the way that I detect this is the smallest resolution I have on my trading screen is a 1 minute bar, right? So normally there's a normal amount of volume that happens, a few hundred lots go this way or that way, right? There's normal volume, but then all of a sudden you'll see something right in coordination with those headlines, 2, 3, 4,000 lots just come piling in, right? Which is 2, 3, 4 million barrels of oil suddenly all being sold in that one little chunk of time. Well, that little chunk of time, all these other algos are looking at that going, oh, I better be on the right side of that trade. Let me get out of my longs. Let me go short too, right? And so, yeah, that's the nudge that happens.
Yeah. Interesting. I never thought of that momentum aspect of it. And then there's China as well. I
don't know what China's up to. Do you?
Exactly. I swear. It is just insane. They're just so quiet in the background. I feel like they're like steps ahead of all of us. Or maybe they're behind us. We're giving them too much credit. I don't know. I don't know what the hell's happening there. Their economy's an enigma. There's all these different cracks that people tell me about, but somehow they keep humming along.
Well, it's astonishing. So China's housing market went from super bubble territory into deep correction, and everybody said, well, that's it, because that was 30% of their GDP was just building apartments, so that should have just absolutely cratered their economy, and I don't think it did anything, and I don't understand that. It's a very weird thing. So they have a command and control economy. I think they're able to move pieces around in ways that other nations can't, because otherwise that should have really cut two at least two legs off of their stool, and nothing.
Yeah. And Jeffrey Curry, he a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the price of oil and trying to figure it out, because obviously he's been extremely long oil, and he's just surprised by how far it's dropped and how quickly it dropped. And he's telling me how, Mari, that something happened in that Trump-Xi meeting, because since then, that was the peak, around that period, 3 days plus or minus. And something happened in that meeting to not only bring down, because it already started going down, the Chinese demand for oil, but keep it down despite the low oil price. He doesn't know what it is. Doesn't know whether next month we'll have Taiwan as part of China or something completely different. But a discussion was had at that time between Trump and Xi. We just don't know what it is. Yeah.
Well, the quid was China stopping importing oil like pretty dramatically. What's the quo pro? Don't know. But I guaranteed China got something out of that. That was max leverage. So we'll see what it is.
Have you been looking at the numbers coming out of the Trump's wealth? How much money he's making from all the stock trades and stuff? Yeah, you have. Yeah,
yeah,
crazy.
When I talk about the moral nihilism, it's just insane to me that a president not only can trade stocks and then make deals, with that being not somehow completely illegal, but the volume of his trading, it's like a full-time sport. Like, you would have a hard time trading that many shares if that was your full-time job, right? So he must have somebody doing it for him, I guess. But at any rate, it's just as unseemly as it looks. And then, there's all kinds of stuff that happened with obviously the meme coins, and then this crazy thing that happened where, and this is the one that still, I don't know how to interpret this one, bothers me a lot. So there was this shooting at Brown University. And then a couple of days later, there was this professor, an MIT professor, gets gunned down at the door of his home. Oh, these two people must have known each other way back when they were both college students. That guy was the head of a fusion company. It was one of his jobs. And the competitor to that fusion company, just days later, got a $9 billion funding commitment from Truth Social, which is Trump's, it's not an energy company. It's just very weird. And I will not be surprised to find out that company, TAE Systems, ends up with a big contract at some point. I mean, we've seen enough examples of this. Like, this is now a thing.
Look, I've said this, I say this a lot. The more I do, obviously, what I'm doing and talk to the people that I talk to, and especially when I have these private conversations, the more I realize how much is happening behind the scenes. It is wild. It's not, I'm not in the belief that there's a few people pulling the strings. It's that easy. They meet in one room and make decisions. But I definitely don't believe that the system is perfect and decentralized and fair as I used to believe 20 years ago, even 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. The reality of it, there's a lot there when you understand things like how much influence certain people have, how easily they can be impacted. Let's just give you a silly example. There was a video a few hours ago. I saw it. There was a video of, I don't know if you could find it, KK. It's a video of Trump, Fox News filming Trump watch himself on Fox News. Did you see that?
Okay, I saw a still picture of it.
I gotta see the video. Let me see if I can find it. KK, if you can find it, it's the most hilarious thing. Oh, there it is. There it is. If you can please play this, KK. Show it on screen. The reason I mention it right now is, and I want you to play it, KK, while I explain it. And this is not the best example because I'm talking about private conversations and private decisions being made, and they're pretty much people that do pull the strings. Just it's not as simplistic as people make it out to be. But this is a smaller example of it. So this is Trump watching Fox News, and on Fox News is filming. It's him being filmed watching Fox News and waving Fox News. You can't make this shit up. So now the reason I mention this is the person that is influencing the world the most right now and will be for the next couple of years. And his mind that is coming up with these decisions is being influenced by Fox News and people speaking on Fox News. So this gives you an idea of the network alone has the ear of the president of the United States. So much so, and I can't remember who told me this. I think it's public information, is that people that want to influence Trump, I think it's public, but people that want to influence Trump would get on the right spot or on the right segment on Fox News and say something specific to get his ear. That was one of the ways to do it. Other ways is like, buying Trump Social, buying membership to his club or Son's Club and all that. But that was the way to get the president's ear. And again, this is an innocent example that I don't have much of a problem with. This is just how the system works. I want to say more sinister examples, but the examples I've started getting a better idea of is like the conversations that she and Trump have. That if we were on a fly on that wall and we'd hear the conversation like, number one is holy shit. Number two, now it makes sense. So this is something I'm realizing more and more. And this kind of, even if you go some of my private conversations made me realize the process that led to Trump to start the war in Iran, who had his ear on the power struggle and who had his attention more, etc. And there's some truth to what people say. The person that has Trump's ear last has the most influence. It's not as simple as that, but it does speak. There's some truth to it. The truth is like having his ear, especially at the right time, has an impact. So yeah, it's just fascinating to see. And then it links to the whole oil price discussion, what's happening in the markets and the corruption we're seeing with the presidency as well. It's kind of, I feel like we're starting to see reality more and more.
I'd agree, but Mario, how much power do you think Trump actually has? Is there a force larger than him we have to discuss or consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've realized that, and you've been speaking about it for a long time, but I've realized that as well more and more. Joe, Ken, Tucker, etc. have done a great job explaining it, and they've kind of woke me up even further to it, like how much influence there is over him. But yeah, freaking hell yeah, like absolutely, man.
Yeah, he's the lightning rod, and we're like, look what Trump is doing, but actually there's a machine operating somewhere in the background that's carrying us along in this story. And so again, you know, sort of maybe the larger framing on this is like, here's what I'm worried about from an oil price perspective. What I'm worried about is that, you know, we're draining our SPR, we're draining our commercial stockpiles, we're draining our inventories of gasoline and diesel. They're all at like multi-year, if not multi-decade lows at this time of the year. And so I'm worried that we're just going to keep this fictitious low price of oil, which keeps demand high, right? So in the United States, year over year demand amongst the citizenry for oil products was up 2.9% year over year, not down 2.9%, not down 5 or 6%, which is probably where it needs to be. It's higher than ever, right? Jet flight miles driven, like we're just, hey, the price is not nearly high enough to cause any sort of demand destruction. In fact, demand is higher. And that's kind of true worldwide as well. We're seeing, I can't find this demand destruction, so we're just eating into our stockpiles. And my concern is that we just keep that up, and then, oh no, something goes wrong with the negotiations, the MOU falls apart, and you know, things get spicy over there again for a bit. And next thing you know, we just slam into oil shortages across the world, but here in the United States as well. You know, we just hit tank bottom. And that's probably one of the most destructive things I could imagine. It would be highly irresponsible to end up there because somebody said, let's, you know, manipulate oil futures lower for some short-term political gain. You know, we want to get through the July 4th weekend, you know, being able to crow about how, you know, oil prices were low and then we'll let them go, or whatever the story is. That I can't. So again, if we get to that point, this is a big if, big scenario, but if we get there and we slam into that, and that was because of, I don't know, we'll just call it ignorance, right? We just got there because it was just some broken process, or it was intentional because somebody was actually trying to engineer that outcome because, you know, Washington, D.C. never let a good crisis go to waste. However we get there, you know, in your heart of hearts, there are people behind there who are going to be all ready for this crisis, air quotes time, right? Oh, good thing we put all those flock cameras in because now we can see if, you know, Joe Blow was trying to like evade the system and he drove too much or more than his allotted amount, or tried to get around, you know, the purchasing requirements, minimums, maximums that we had in place for gasoline, whatever the story is. You just know that next crisis is going to be an opportunity to really use the data centers, use the flock cameras, use the whatevers. And you already heard, I think, Marco Rubio coming out talking about how passports now, well, we'll just use this facial recognition thing now. You don't have to go to Walgreens anymore. You know, that digital future state, that's something they want, whoever the they is in this story. But that's something they want. And we know that because when they want something, it's always easy, right? It's just easy. Data centers popping up. It's almost impossible for locals to organize against them. All sorts of inconvenient narratives like climate change. Suddenly they took those right off the table. Like, stop talking about that, right? That's easy. If you want to do something else, though, that they don't want, it's always hard. It's like selling raw milk. Man, that's hard, you know, or something. Yeah. So that's the easy, hard framework that we use over at my site with my tribe. And we talk about that because when things are easy, that's just something that they want. So yeah, I guess they want, you know, data centers and flock cameras at this point, you know, figure out why.
Yeah. Yeah. Well explained. Chris, thanks for jumping on. I always enjoy our conversations. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me again.
Can't wait to do this again. All right, guys.